Now, a failed asylum seeker whose deportation was blocked when cabin crew refused to fly him home has pleaded guilty to raping a 15-year-old girl. 40-year-old Anicet Mayela, who once campaigned outside a detention centre holding a sign stating migrants are not criminals, could face life in jail after admitting to the attack on the teenager.
He arrived in the UK in 2004 after paying an agent to smuggle him out of Africa, where he claimed his life was at risk. Joining us to discuss this story is Robert Bates. He's a research director at the Centre for Migration Control. This is yet another guy who was allowed to stay in this country, successfully fought off deportation. And clearly he should not have been allowed to stay because he's the wrong sort of person. Turned out he's a rapist. How did he get to stay and how does this get to happen, Robert?
Well, he basically was able to stay because Britain's asylum policy isn't in the hands of the government at the moment. It's in the hands of left-wing activists, lawyers, human rights activists, do-gooders that are prepared to, go above and beyond and utilise and politicise any position that they happen to hold. And the government just haven't gripped any semblance of the asylum crisis since the get-go. I mean, obviously this case, the attempted deportation was way back in 2005, and you can tell it was a long time ago because they actually managed to get him on the plane in the first place. Nowadays, we can only dream of that.
That dates it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gives it away a little bit, doesn't it?
I mean, what I find interesting is I think there's a big government cover-up here, and they are suppressing certain bits of information, certain statistics that are in the public domain in other countries. And I'm talking in particular about when you look at crimes committed by people who have come into the country from abroad. And if you look at some of the data in countries like Germany, in countries like Sweden, in countries like the Netherlands, for violent crime and especially sex crime, there is a disproportionate representation of people who were not native to that country. Do you think the government will ever release those statistics? Do you have any sort of idea of what they might look like?
Well, so a hat tip to Robert Jenrick and Neil O'Brien, who did a lot of work actually banging the drum on this and, talking about the fact that we simply don't know at the moment the proportion of crimes that are being committed by foreign nationals. And you would think that is a key part of a mass migration debate, given we are being inflicted with a mass migration project. The very least they could do is provide us with the data so that we can assess, have a cost-benefit analysis. Like you see in countries in Europe, they have this data at their fingertips. But I think the problem with Britain is there was such an assumption when we began with the mass migration project that it would be a universal good, that there was almost no need to justify it. There was no need to collect this data that might actually help guide future policymakers. And we are now in a position where we are flying blind. I don't think the Conservatives will have time to make any amendments, and I can't see any Labour government being inclined to do so either. So I think, unfortunately, we'll have at least another 5 years of not really knowing what's going on.
When these migrants arrive here, most of them by illegal methods. I mean, they smuggle themselves into this country, either on illegal small boats or dinghies or underneath lorries, or, they come here illegally. And then they go, please can we stay because we're asylum seekers? And we nearly always say, yes, why don't we just kick them out? Because you just broke our laws.
Well, because the government are jumping scared. The strength at the moment of the human rights lobby, essentially, is phenomenal. Yeah. Apologies. And, yeah, so the government just don't stand a chance. They're up against taxpayer-funded law firms, taxpayer-funded charities, taxpayer-funded campaign groups, and they're all prepared to drag their heels, kicking and screaming, and make every single case an absolute nightmare for the government. And that's why the court cases and the backlogs that you're hearing about in the asylum system are mind-blowing.
I mean, we can't have a sensible conversation about this either, despite when we saw the, horrific crime committed by Abdul Azadi, a man who had committed a sex crime, and that was the basis of him not being deported. Well, they, frown upon people who commit sex crimes from where he came from, so we can't go back there. He might be in danger. What I worry about this is the more we suppress the debate, the more you have cabin crews saying, I'm not going to fly this, rapist, gun-toting drug dealer home because, poor thing, they must be innocent because borders must be open. If someone's being, deported, they're clearly the innocent victim. Is we are actually putting, in particular, I'd say, the safety and security of women and girls at risk. And if you look at big research projects being done in Sweden on this, I mean, even when you think of New Year's Eve in Cologne, back in, I think it was 2015, when over 1,000 young women were sexually assaulted and one was even raped publicly in the main square by gangs of migrant men. It's vital we wake up and start having a conversation about this.
Absolutely. I mean, thousands of undocumented men are going to arrive this year, and the fact that people don't seem to think that that might lead to some kind of safety issues, especially for women, is mind-blowing. And you hear stories of, you know, that people now being put in accommodation right by primary schools and secondary schools, and the fact seems to escape our policymakers that these men are undocumented. We don't know about their past misdemeanors.
I mean, I think it's important to point out that no one is suggesting by any way, shape or form that, you know, migrants as a general category are all terrible criminal people. I don't think that's true at all. But I think one thing that has to be discussed is when people are coming from cultures that are wildly different to our own, whose cultural normatives and values are not those of the West and haven't been brought up in societies where respect of women is, you know, expected. And also, I would say, the massive inundation of pornography, where a lot of men from other cultures look at white women, especially when you've got a blonde-haired white woman, and think, well, oh, I've seen this sort of woman on film. And you've got as well in you know, various community groups and mosques, young men being taught these Western girls don't respect themselves. So I think you put that all together and you've got a pretty dangerous cocktail.
We absolutely do. But again, all of this goes missing when it comes to the immigration debate. All that matters is that GDP figure. That's all that is framing the debate at the moment. Nothing to do with health and safety implications or then, you know, more systemic issues with the healthcare system, school places, things like that. It is literally just more people equals higher GDP equals we're doing our job all right. And that's what's driving the OBR, and that ultimately is what drives government policy as a result.
I think the data now is actually showing quite the opposite, that it's actually pushing down GDP per capita.
But you know, what's annoying about this, annoying is the wrong word, infuriating, is that these sex offenders, as you said, Abdul Azidi, far from his sex offence, he sexually assaulted a woman, far from him that getting him kicked out of the country, it became the reason he was allowed to stay, because I think he was from Afghanistan, I think. And he said, if I go back, I'll be persecuted. So what we are doing as a nation, we are prioritising the safety of, shall we say, Afghan women over British women. That we're prepared to let these people stay at the expense of the safety of women who live in this country. That is just grotesque.
It's self-flagellation. We are sacrificing ourselves almost on the altar of human rights. Human rights become above anything else, and at this point you have to wonder whether the debate can actually be reversed, given just the sheer hold, and I can't stress enough, the sheer hold that human rights lobby does seem to have over every aspect of immigration policy at the moment.
It's a very serious subject, and of course everyone is completely gagged when it comes to talking about it in a grown-up and adult way.
Indeed. One last question, Robert. I mean, on the Rwanda policy, do you think we'll ever get a plane off the ground?
Nope, we will not. No, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but no, we will not.
OK, well, on that bombshell, thanks very much, Robert.
Pigs might fly before a flight takes off to Rwanda.
Robert Bates there. Thank you very much, mate. Thank you.